Hello, everyone. Lindsay Price here, and welcome to Embracing Failure in the Drama Classroom. So, things are a little different this year. For some, for a lot of people, things are a lot different. 2020 has brought us so many twists and turns and new experiences, new challenges, new vocabulary. Type yes or no in chat, although I think I know the answer. Who is tired of Zoom meetings? So I will be sharing a number of quotes in this talk. And let's start with this one from Napoleon Hill. Opportunity often comes disguised in the form of misfortune or temporary defeat. Let us hope that what we are dealing with right now is going to be temporary. So this year has been all about change. And it's not a change that we want or welcome. This is not an amazing new job or an exciting move or a new relationship. But even then, even in the best of circumstances, the best of times, the best situation, most of us are reticent to make change. And that is because of dealing with the change that we did not choose. 2020, looking at you. You know, it's the change that is thrust upon us, sort of like being drop-kicked in the wilderness or drop-kicked into the middle of a tornado and told, find your way home, figure it out. Whether we choose it or whether it's chosen for us, change is hard. Further to that, change is a risk. And when you've got something that is both hard and risky, it opens the door wide open to you, the possibility of failure. And if there is something that most people fear just as much as change, or even more so than change, it's failure. It's something to be avoided at all costs. Sven-Göran Eriksson, the greatest barrier to success is the fear of failure. How many of you, type yes or no in chat, how many of you have a student or students who fear failure to the point where they won't do something? The thing is, failure is really important. Progress depends on making mistakes. In science, failure is a data point. We cannot change or transform without some failure. In the creative process, we need failure to do our best work. Failure is a vital step on the road to success in rehearsal and group work and devising and playwriting, basically everything that happens in the drama classroom. We want students to embrace that mentality, that failure step. We want them to embrace failure with a try, fail, try again, fail again approach. That's how we grow. That's how we improve. Samuel Beckett, try again, fail again, fail better. But what happens time and time again is that students fail once and fall apart. Now more than ever, maybe more than ever, the most they've ever, students fear failure. So how do we get students to embrace failure as a necessary part of the process? And then there's the beauty that is 2020, where failure is around every corner, where teachers have had to deal with failure daily with little training or little support for distance learning, be that virtually on a virtual platform or in person and social distance. And teachers were expected to be immediate experts. How do we embrace failure in these unfamiliar and uncertain times? If you would please, write in chat, what has been your biggest failure of 2020? What does that mean to you? Is that hard to write down? Is it something you don't really want to share with anyone? Does it feel negative to you? Something to think about. Thomas Edison, I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work. So, the image I'm going to use today in this talk is the butterfly, or actually, more specifically, the transformation from caterpillar to butterfly. As we talk about and to emphasize the importance of moving forward, embracing change, and the most important and the hardest to do, embracing failure. Because if we had to describe this year, an ugly caterpillar who voraciously consumes and destroys plant life to thousands of times its body weight, that would work. Or think of the butterfly effect, where the single beat of a butterfly's wing causes monumental impact. Some might say pandemic impact. So let's start with our caterpillar friend. In the caterpillar stage, as I said, they do nothing but consume. The caterpillar eats and eats and eats. Okay, so how do we compare this to failure? How do we use this to put failure in a positive light? Failure, or failing, is a way of consuming knowledge, especially when things are hard or go wrong. Failure is knowledge. Progress depends on making mistakes. So when that improv scene goes wrong, it's an opportunity to try again with new knowledge. When the student playwright writes a scene and it doesn't go well, it doesn't get the desired response, it's an opportunity to rewrite. These failures are not negative. They feel negative and they feel awful, which I'll get to in a moment. But the point is to try and get students to try again. Students like to do things in one go. You may have noticed this. I am only going to present this scene once. I'm only going to do that costume rendering once. I'm only going to write one draft of that play. I got to the end. I'm finished. Why would I write another one? And that's the mindset we want to work on to change. That the true failure is only doing something once and not trying again. Instead of consuming that knowledge, learning from it, and changing because of it. Caterpillars also let go. They shed their skins up to 5 times to grow bigger ones. They shed and move on. So to use failure successfully, we have to let go. We have to let go of ideas that don't work, scenes everybody forgot their lines, and so many things have gone wrong in the drama classroom this year in 2020, and so many more things are going to go wrong. Let them go. We tend to hang on to failure. We hang on to the bad so much more than the good. We have to shed those failure moments and use them to move forward. Peter Kelly. Failure is like a caterpillar before it becomes a butterfly, which is great to say. That's all great. But how do we shed failure? How do we encourage students? How do we encourage ourselves to use failure as knowledge and try again? Well, one of the ways you can do that in the drama classroom is to redefine failure. Write in chat, one sentence. What does failure mean to you? What is your definition of failure? What does it mean to fail? Write that down. So if we look traditionally at the definition of failure, we have lack of success, falling short, not doing what's expected of us, stops working normally. So it's not surprising when we look at this definition of failure that we feel so awful when we determine something as a failure, or that we are failures. Because we don't often say, it failed, or that failed. We say, I failed, I am a failure. Failure is personal, and it feels awful. And it's easy to see why students view failure as a completely negative experience and something to be avoided. They don't want anything to do with it. They are associating the experience with the traditional definition. Add to that in the education system, failure has consequences. If you fail, your grade can be affected. Unless you're in one of those no fail, no grade schools. But it doesn't matter. You can take away the grade. Failure is inevitable. Failure will happen. J.M. Barrie. We are all failures. At least the best of us are. So let's look at an exercise in redefining failure that you can do with your students. Just as you set some etiquette guidelines, some classroom rules, some expectations for your students, you want to set the definition of failure for your classroom, especially before you do any creative work. So the first thing you're going to do is look for some quotes that put failure in a positive light. For example, if you're willing to fail, interestingly, you tend to succeed, interestingly. Edward Albee. George Bernard Shaw. A life spent making mistakes is not only more honorable, but more useful than a life spent doing nothing. So you're going to combine enough quotes to fill a page, and then you're going to divide students into groups, and each group will have the quotes and review them, read them aloud, of course, discuss them, and narrow down to one quote. What's the one quote that speaks to them? This is going to be their source material, their inspiration for their new definition. But when they're writing this definition, you want to give them a place to start. So write the new definition based off the quote that they have chosen using the term failure is, using the sentence starter, failure is. So here's an example. Already starts with failure is, so we're off to a good start. Failure is the key to success. Each step teaches us something, and this is Moriai Ueshiba. So if I was going to take this quote and throw failure is and think of a new definition using this as inspiration, failure is just a step on the way to success. So your groups share their definitions and then have the whole class choose one. Choose one as the classroom definition of failure. Write it up, post it where everyone can see, refer to it often, make it a mantra. Make it your failure mantra. And then, along with redefining failure, you want to define success. If traditionally in the definition of failure, it is a lack of success, well then what does it mean to be successful in the drama classroom? You don't want to leave it as an amoebic, undefined thing. That's when failure can come rushing in when you don't have a specific goal. Back to our caterpillar friend. The caterpillar has a very successful or specific goal to become a butterfly. And they have to go through a huge transformation to reach that goal. Well, how would you define success? Write in one sentence in chat. Share with your fellow teachers, what does it mean to be successful? Winston Churchill would describe it as, success is stumbling from failure to failure with no loss of enthusiasm. So I actually think there are a couple of issues with defining success. And the first of them being, we often define success as a very narrow door. X only succeeds if you do Y, right? That's kind of a trap. If that's the only thing, if Y is the only thing that makes X successful, what happens if Y doesn't happen? That's exactly what happened to me. I fell into that trap as a young playwright. When I thought about what made a playwright successful, well, the only thing was professionally produced by theaters. Which makes sense. I mean, that's what a lot of playwrights want. But what if that doesn't happen to you? And it didn't happen to me at all. Except I was doing really well in the school market. I was writing, I was producing, I was publishing. But because it didn't fit my narrow definition of success, I felt like a failure. I saw myself as a failure, even though I was doing all these great things. When I opened up my definition of success to make a living as a playwright, to write plays I'm happy about, It was freeing. It was much more satisfying. Isn't that what everybody wants, to make a living at their craft? So make sure that your definition of success is not a narrow, narrow door. Then the next thing is, we often confuse overall success with day-to-day success. We don't want to mix those two together. You need two separate definitions: overall, daily, or day-to-day. Overall is your eventual goal. Day-to-day is your today goal. What are you striving for at the end of the project? What are you striving for today? These are two separate goals to have. A daily success is going to be especially important this year, because successes may feel far and few between. It just may feel like failure upon failure upon failure, especially if success is based on something that you did last year. So keep that in mind, is that when you have a daily success, it's what's happening today, and it can be very small. Think of success like a ladder. There's that overall goal at the top, but in order to get there, you have to climb each rung. You have to climb each step one at a time. You also want a day-to-day success because every day is different, right? The overall may stay the same. That top of the ladder is not going anywhere, but the daily is going to depend on the day. If you're doing playwriting or devising or scene work, the creative process changes daily. It's going to be different. It all's going to depend on what you're working on. And this doesn't mean, to have a daily success does not mean low standards. It is success that is attainable so that students continue to move forward. They are moving up the ladder one step at a time, going towards that overall goal. You can't jump up a ladder. You need to do it steadily. You need to go one step at a time. So in your classroom with your students, you want to identify, what do we need to do today to be successful? What is our today goal? What is the one thing that's going to take us another step up the ladder towards the overall goal? So for example, if you're doing devising, your overall goal, your end goal, is a producible product or experience. But if you're standing at the bottom of the ladder, what's your first step? What's one step? Brainstorming on a topic. One thing. All right, back to our friend the caterpillar. So in the chrysalid stage, the caterpillar basically melts into goo, and from that the butterfly is born. It is a moment of nothing where so much happens. It is important, especially right now, to acknowledge that doing nothing is valuable. Sometimes we need to do nothing and think, just think, or reflect. Sometimes even that's too much. We need to pull back from everything. We cannot be going at octane speed all the time. The creative process doesn't work that way. Human beings don't work that way. I'm sure you've had this experience this year. It feels like 2020 has been all anxiety all the time, all disaster reaction, all trying to keep up at an octane speed, and it's not possible to keep up. It's not possible to keep going. At some point, you may need to melt and see what happens. What are you doing to counter octane speed? Where do you find your calm? Throw that into chat, if you will. Write it down. Share with your fellow teachers. In the drama classroom, this year you may be feeling pressured to keep up with what you did last year, to produce and keep up your class and execute your class at a level that is impossible to do right now. If you're working virtually, if you're working social distance, if you're doing a hybrid of both, everything takes longer. Everything is going to take twice as much time, maybe even 3 times as much time. And everyone is not going to be in a headspace to learn. Maybe you're not in a good headspace to teach. Global pandemics have that tendency to generate a lot of worry and anxiety. So you're trying to keep up. Maybe you're trying to keep up with pressure to execute. Your students are feeling anxiety. And now to the fire, this is a situation nobody wants to be in. We are resisting this change. We did not choose it. Doing nothing is valuable. And when I say nothing, I'm not talking about vacancy. We're not talking about, the wind going between your ears. Nothing is find a way to exist in direct opposition to all-out anxiety, all-out octane speed, finding a moment of calm, giving your brain a chance to rest and reset. So I would actually suggest incorporating some form of meditation into your class sessions. Encourage your students and yourselves to find a moment of calm. And meditation is not a moment where everyone closes their eyes and falls asleep, although that does happen all the time. It is acknowledging what's happening right now, breathing, and letting go. Lama Surya Das. With every breath, the old moment is lost. A new moment arrives. We exhale and we let go of the old moment. It is lost to us. In doing so, we let go of the person we used to be. We inhale and breathe in the moment that is becoming. In doing so, we welcome the person we are becoming. We repeat the process. This is meditation. This is renewal. This is life. So you can use guided meditations in your classroom. They're easy to find online, or you could do something very simple and just breathe as a group. You could all just make sure you're breathing, write yes or no in chat. Do you find yourself holding your breath more these days? So we're going to do a count the breath exercise. Make sure you're comfortable, phone's down, close your eyes. There's nothing that you need to look at. And your focus here, your goal is to simply focus on the inhale and the exhale without letting your mind wander. So simply focus on your breath, focus on the count. Don't think about what you have to do next. Don't think about what you didn't do before. Don't think about what's worrying you right now. We don't want the mind to wander away. We just want to keep it right here in front of us. And if it does wander away, there's no judgment. Bring it back. It's fine. Come on back. You can always start again. So we're going to inhale and exhale on a 4 count. Relax, shoulders down, close your eyes. Here we go. Inhale. 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale. 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's do that again. Inhale. 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale. 1, 2, 3, 4. We're going to move to 6. If that causes you anxiety, stay at 4, but keep focused. Focus here. Don't let the mind wander. If it does, bring it on back. Here we go. Inhale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And exhale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Sometimes something as simple as breathing is the most important exercise moment of all. Now, before we go on, we're going to do a physical release breath. We're going to do lion's breath. If you've got students who are just, they've got all this anxiety built up, well, they need to release. So do this wonderful release breath. This is lion's breath. You inhale on a 4 count and you exhale on a 1 count and expel. And your tongue comes all the way out. Try and keep your eyes open as much as you can and make that wonderful breathy noise. So we go inhale, 1, 2, 3, 4, exhale. Release, release, release. And then you can get your body into it too. We've got your hands right up here. They're like claws, but you're going to keep your fingers spread as wide as you can. And I'm going to be a little gentle here because I've got things in front of me that I don't want to go flying. But you want to expel, arms out, push your hands out as you do the exhale. And the tongue is out and the eyes are open and ready. Okay, inhale. 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale and release.
Almost forgot to tell.
All right, back to the chrysalid phase. So this is a phase of extreme change. This is a phase of isolation. The caterpillar has to transform alone. There are a ton of quotes about this. Mandy Hale, a season of loneliness and isolation is when the caterpillar gets its wings. Both failure and change can be quite lonely and isolating. What if you want to change and everyone around you would rather you stay the same? And with failure, a really common reaction is, I'm the only one failing right now. I'm the only one who is going through this. Everyone else around me is succeeding and I am struggling. You are not alone. You are not alone in your struggles, and you don't have to go through it alone. Reach out to your fellow teachers, even the ones who you think are doing that wonderful succeeding thing. I bet you they're going through the exact same thing you are. Reach out to your fellow teachers. Reach out if you are part of an online community. Reach out to them. Don't go through this alone. Reach out. There is no shame in saying the words, I am struggling, because I think someone's going to turn around and say, oh, I am struggling so much too. Nicole Stevens. When you find yourself cocooned in isolation and cannot find your way out of darkness, remember, this is similar to the place where caterpillars go to grow their wings. So how about dealing with this in the drama classroom? How do we deal with loneliness and isolation and all the fear that comes with it? Well, you can make failure familiar. It is something that happens. It's something that happens all the time. It's something that happens to all of us. And this is not me saying failure is easy. By making it familiar, you're making it easy. No, failure is a challenge. Change is a challenge. But you can't change without that failure. But when you fail, if nothing bad happens, the buildings don't crumble and there's no explosions and Carmen Burana isn't playing in the background. If you fail and nothing bad happens, it's easier to fail again and maybe again. Maya Angelou. We delight in the beauty of the butterfly, but rarely admit the changes it has gone through to achieve that beauty. So here's a quick activity you can do with your students. The worst thing that can happen is, in person, you're going to stand in a social distance circle. Virtually, this will work perfectly well. And every person is going to express the worst thing that could happen in a situation, like an audition. What's the worst thing that could happen in an audition? Well, you could fart. You could forget all your lines. You could give the worst performance ever. You could throw up. You could faint. You could insult the director. You could fall through a trap door. You could set the whole place on fire. The sky's the limit. Push your students to go to the most extreme when it comes to the absolute worst. And you'll see a couple of things that happen in this exercise. First, people often fear the same things, and we are never alone in that fear. Even though it feels like we're alone, someone is always right there with us. Okay, maybe not starting a fire, but you get the point. And if you push your students to go to the extreme, to really be ridiculous, that is going to create levity. Everyone is going to laugh, and no one is being laughed at. Everyone is laughing together, and that relieves tension and fear. And when you are releasing that fear, you're letting that fear go, you are taking failure off of its pedestal. And that's what we want. Another way to demonstrate this is to share famous failures. So these are people that did not become magically famous. Failure happened to them, and they didn't let it stop them. Failure happened to them, and it's going to happen to you, and it's going to happen to me. So here's some examples. Michael Jordan was cut from his high school basketball team. Walt Disney declared bankruptcy when he was 22 years old. Oprah Winfrey was demoted and fired early in her career. John Grisham's first book was rejected by 16 publishers. Dr. Seuss's first book was rejected 28 times. Now, say you don't want to focus on famous people. Okay, look for inspiring failures. So Elizabeth Blackwell was the first U.S. woman to receive a medical degree in 1849 after being rejected by 29 schools and only being accepted into one as a prank. You can also look for inventions that technically were called failures, but were in fact really successful. The scientist who invented the glue for Post-it notes was actually trying to create the opposite, a strong glue, and failed at that. And this is the drama classroom, so we can also personify failure. Turn failure into a character. So divide your students into groups and have everyone write a character profile for failure. Who is failure? What name would they give failure? What physical traits do they have? What clothes would they choose to wear? What are their personality traits? What are their pet peeves? What is failure's pet peeve? What are their likes and their dislikes? What is failure's favorite movie? And what food does failure hate more than anything? The more details, the better. You'll find this exercise is also one that has a lot of levity to it, which is really great. The more details, the more they're going to be able to see this character. And then, of course, you want them to write a scene where failure is a character. And now we're getting into what failure sounds like and how they move. Trina Paulus. How does one become a butterfly? You must want to fly so much that you are willing to give up being a caterpillar. And then the butterfly emerges! Hooray! But we're not done yet. The butterfly does not just emerge from the chrysalis, give a little shake and fly off. No, you do not just wake up and become the butterfly. Growth is a process. Rupi Kaur. So the butterfly needs to make sure when they come out of the chrysalis that they literally have space to spread their wings. When the wings come out of that chrysalis, they are wet and they are wrinkled. And the butterfly needs to find space to expand the wings so that they will dry. And if the butterfly doesn't take this time, if it rushes, then the wings won't dry properly and the butterfly will not be able to fly. So you want your students to embrace failure and embrace change. That's what we want. That's the goal. That's great. And just keep in mind that it can't be rushed. They will need time, and they're going to need to find the right time to metaphorically spread their wings. There's not going to be this failure rocks. Oh, I love failure. Failure, yes. Kind of instant change. But it is 100% worth it to keep on trying. Find ways in for students. Redefine failure. Make failure familiar. And I'm going to leave you with one more. Celebrate failure. So instead of fearing failure or fearing the unknown that comes with change, make it something to celebrate. Make it a positive when things go wrong. If you're playing games and, it goes awry, instead of turning it into a tragedy, celebrate the mistake. Have a cheer. If you want students to write multiple drafts of a play or improv without fear or try on complicated scenes or tackle set design, lighting design, costume design, students need to be okay with making mistakes, celebrating them, and moving on. So another thing you can do is to celebrate failure is to create an atmosphere of yes. So we default so quickly to no, don't we, right? I can't do that. That's not going to happen. I'm no good. So get into the habit of having your students and you saying yes in your classroom. For example, this is a nice warm-up game called Yes. So you're standing in a socially distanced circle. This works. We can do a variation of it online as well. And person A points and makes eye contact with person B, right? points, makes eye contact with person B. In a virtual situation, you would add a name. So points at person B and says their name, Jen. If you're doing it in a social distance circle where you don't want students moving around or everyone's behind masks, same thing. Point, eye contact, say name, Jen. And when person B, Jen, has that eye contact, knows that person A is talking to them, they also make eye contact with person A and they say yes. That's the response. So, Jen, yes. And then person A, once they've done that, person A then moves across the space to take person B's spot, or you can replace the move with some kind of movement in place, like, right? It doesn't matter. It's all about having a series of steps, making eye contact with people, in some cases, making eye contact or saying their name and saying yes, right? That's what we really want. So while person A is moving across the space, if you're doing it that way, person B then has to point, make eye contact with person C, and person C needs to say yes, and so on. So either we have people, saying yes and moving across the space, or we have people pointing and saying people's names, yes, and doing a movement in space. But it's all about that atmosphere of yes. And once they get going and once they get moving, then what you have is students basically making eye contact with each other and saying yes, 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 yes. You have the whole room just saying yes, right? Yes is a powerful word, so why not use it for good? Get students in the habit of saying yes, especially when it comes to failure. If you want students to move forward in the classroom, it's going to require that they take risk, right? They have to get out of their comfort zone, and that means failure. And there's a lot of risk in failure, right? There's the risk of being wrong or the risk of being laughed at. And if you can create an atmosphere of yes with your students, that it's a habit to say yes, then failure is going to be a lot less stressful. And it's going to be more of a positive experience. And your students' work will only get better. And you too need to embrace failure, right? There's no better time than right now than to show your students that you embrace failure too, that you are going to celebrate mistakes as whatever is being thrown at you this year. And you're able to take them on and you are able to embrace whatever comes your way. So if you want students to embrace failure, open your arms up wide and embrace it twice as hard. Okay, 3 quotes to leave you with. If you're not prepared to be wrong, you'll never come up with anything original. Ken Robinson. Failure is something we can avoid only by saying nothing, doing nothing, and being nothing. Dennis Waitley. Never confuse a single defeat with final defeat. F. Scott Fitzgerald. Thank you, guys.